Darnell, Washington.
Okay, am I on? Okay, good. Is my mic? I want to thank you, everyone, for being here. It's definitely an honor to be in such an esteemed group of company. I do think that it's very important to let everyone know that our mission today, as far as the integration of cybersecurity as well as the physical security from a convergent standpoint, is so important nowadays. We're available and we understand what are the cybersecurity risks that we have. But today, a lot of IT companies and a lot of organizations, they don't have the level of understanding that if you can't protect the physical environment that their data architectures reside in, even though we're using mobile technologies, that you can't protect the data. So what we're here today is to offer some information about some technologies and some future next generation strategies that we can employ and use every day to increase our cybersecurity posture and our position. So we're going to have a pretty entertaining period of time, so I think we should just go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk about the next generation strategies, and I want to just go ahead and start by this. You saw it coming. There was a day when we were in a position where we would just imagine different kinds of technologies, and we would look at different kinds of things that was exciting to us. And then we said, okay, I saw this stuff back in the day. It's like I saw the Jetsons, I saw Star Trek, I saw Battlestar Galactica. I think I'm dating myself a little bit. But as we start going on to this, then one of the things that I saw, and I went out and I did some really good research, and it's just all over the place. So let's go to the next slide. This slide is really busy, but the movies about Star Trek and the things that you saw from the 1950s on up, they're all here. You got battle robots. That's Battlestar Galactica. You got the flip phone, that's Star Trek. You got the stun guns, which were the phasers of Star Trek. You got drones, which are the spaceships that they flew in the Jetsons. All of these things is that we saw that these things that we used to help us could also be used by our adversaries to affect us and to impact our critical infrastructure, those things that we do every day. We saw it coming. We have space flight. A lot of people don't know how these ships land, and Elon Musk just did some fantastic things as far as being able to land as shuttles, fly out in space, and have it land where you want it to land. They had that stuff back in the day. How to actually do it had been conceptualized. The thought process has already been there, and if man can dream it, we can achieve it. So, when we start looking at the world of cybersecurity today, we have to think that there's not a major difference from what these guys thought back in the day to what we have now. So, we talk about transporters and teleportation, and we talk about a lot of things as far as in the past. The things like, why did Star Trek have to have shields? And how were they able to go into warp and to being able to establish mechanisms so that they could get on the Klingon ship, et cetera, et cetera. I can give you numerous examples, but intrusion and breach has been around all the time. Cowboys and Indians had to find a way. Mission Impossible had to find a way to do those things, to create vulnerabilities and to exploit vulnerabilities, to being able to get inside of the enemy's fortress and to rescue the princess and to do all of those things. So, the parts that are sobering is that we saw it coming. The industry knew that they needed to develop cybersecurity strategies and technologies. But the speed to market, the speed to profitability, the fact that people want convenience more than privacy, and cost from manufactured products. If we manufactured iPhones and Android devices and all of these things in the United States, they would be 3 times the price, because we rely on labor that is affordable in a world that creates vulnerabilities for us. And they look at different things as far as with the Department of Defense and supply chains and all of these other things. But it has come home to roost, and it's here today. And I think that everyone would not disagree with me to say that cybersecurity is at the top of our minds in every industry, but also that we have to do a better job. So to reflect that, it goes into the point that over 80% of US federal agencies have reported a successful breach. And the other 20, they probably just didn't know. We already know about that. But the thing is that what's more important is that all of these assessments and the point-in-time references that they used to use, which were known as the certification and accreditation and the risk management framework and all of these other organizations, only represented a snapshot point in time to show that at this time I was secure. And that was before that next Windows update. The Windows update changed the whole scheme of things. It could bring a secure environment into an area that could be a hacker hangout for your organization. So what happens is that once companies have had a breach and have had companies that have been vendors of these federal agencies, the vendors have imposed a cybersecurity liability and a risk for these federal agencies. We all know about the things about the default passwords, shared passwords, not being able to use a unique password when you have vendors who come in and to provide support and services to your organization. You have 200 technicians sometimes that are supporting your one organization. And when they come in to fix a product that they are contracted to maintain, what happens when Joe leaves that organization and goes to work for the competitor? Does he know that password to get into your location? Does he have that remote access password? He probably does. And if he doesn't, he probably knows someone on the inside that can share that information with someone else. So there are actually policies and rules and regulations that provide capability for why people should change these passwords every time that someone else leaves. Just like an employee, you change the locks on your door, just so that you can make sure that if they do, there's a detection mechanism of being able to find out that they did it. The world of cyber doesn't have that. We still operate using standards, and we don't apply the same levels of security to physical security concerns to the cybersecurity controls. And the sobering point about it is that some companies think this is an acceptable risk. You wouldn't give someone keys to your car when you go in to go pump gas. You know what they're going to do. They're going to drive off with it, right? So when your car's gone and you leave your keys on the counter and you go to the mall or whatever, you should expect for your car to be gone by the time it gets done. So the other part about why we don't do what we should do is that how many people here, and I don't want you actually to raise your hands, but how many people use the same passwords to log in to Facebook and AOL as you do your company's computers? And if those people that are not here, how many people that might manage organizations or manage companies have employees that do? The answer is heck to the yeah. And guess what? They not only represent vulnerabilities, but with mobile devices, people are willing to allow these companies to get the app to share their location, to share their email, to share their contact addresses, and furthermore, how many people use the same cell phone for work and for personal reasons? When you open that app, your personal contacts, your business contacts, everything is being sent to these third-party applications. You don't know where they are, you don't know who they are, but they actually have control of your mobile device. They can manipulate, they can track your progress, track where you are, and they call it sales and advertising, but it's really malvertising because they're really using capabilities of your mobile device that are, you signed up for it in the terms of agreement, but you haven't read what they're really asking you to really give up. And if you read the terms and conditions, you'd probably think give a second thought to actually deploying that app on your phone, but we do it anyway. But we like to keep track of our kids. There's apps to do that. There's apps to have fine dining, to order food in restaurants, and you have some people who allow other people to even use their cell phones to order Amazon Prime and all of that stuff. Corporate computing devices that are being able to be used. And so, I just want to wrap that part up, is that we are sacrificing privacy and security for convenience. And they saw it coming, and we saw it coming too. So let's go on to the next slide. So, everybody knows about Target. I'm not going to really speak too much on that. But let's talk a little bit about some supply chain issues, okay? We all know that China is the #1 manufacturer of electronic circuit boards and programmable logic boards and forward programmable gate arrays. But software has always been dependent upon hardware. All of these guys who've always developed these applications and software, they were at a very high level because being able to be a programmer was something that was of high esteem, of being able to write code that could do this and they could do that. But you saw it coming. They had software applications back in the day. On Star Trek, when they had those panels and they could go into warp, they used their fingers and they used their hands. Now, law enforcement nowadays doing the same thing, believe me. The tools are advanced and they're using advanced biometrics. They used biometrics back then. But what's happening is that underneath of all of the software applications, you have a hardware level. And the hardware levels that talk to these network connected devices and all of these things, the backdoors and the malware is actually built in. Not that it's to be discovered, but when they get ready to use it, it's available. And if you really know about the complexities of what's going on the internal circuit boards, my father was the deputy director of NSA. And they actually built a semiconductor processing plant at NSA at Fort Meade because they couldn't trust what was going on in Russia. My father also was the person who was behind when the United States hired Russians to build a Russian embassy. Well, they had to tear it down because the Russians had built bugs inside of the building. They have bugs and sensors and electronic sensors in Washington, D.C. that the Secret Service and the FBI had to go in and they discovered corporate espionage and things at the federal level where we just gave up all of the information. But where the bottom line is that we see a lot of supply chain infections that are built into mobile devices and hardware. And one of the areas that I want to use as an example was we work with a lot of commercial data breaches, and some of them are pretty bad. What we've seen is we've seen a company where they ordered a keyboard from another manufacturer their keyboard broke. So corporate espionage and cybercrime and the motivations of the actors are so high that they actually found a keyboard that had a wireless 4G router and a keylogger built into the system. They sent the keyboard in, the person hooked it up and connected it to the computer, allowing the attacker to be outside of the premises to go in and actually manipulate to control the computer, and they created a little glitch, they erased the file off the computer they called tech support. So tech support went in and they were like, oh, we can't figure it out. So then they go ahead and they call the systems admin. And he remotes into the computer using usernames and passwords of administrative domain logins. And all of a sudden, the outside attacker has full control of the entire environment. So it goes from supply chain to the fact that we need to do better and that we saw it all before. It's only going to get worse if we don't do a better job at being able to protect our hardware and our devices, and I think everyone would agree. So, as we go on to the next slide, we talked about some of the consequences, right? In things like missile silos and areas that are in critical infrastructure protection, we know that Department of Homeland Security was always involved in cyber, but they really didn't have a good level of understanding of the cyber physical systems until the cameras started getting hacked, until the things that started happening where Department of Homeland Security were looking at counterfeit and supply chain issues. But then they started publishing the advisories about the medical implanted devices and the insulin heart pumps. And they said that it's possible actually to kill someone using cyber. When that was a game changer for Homeland Security, because what they started doing was they started realizing that our lives are so physically connected, just like Terminator, you know, there's flesh on the outside, but there's machine on the inside. You know, we're going to get into that a little bit later. But we all know that the risk of being able to overclock and overprocess and overheat processors, they can make laptops explode, they can make the battery, ask about Samsung. What they did with the batteries would heat up. They were actually dangerous. You know, these equipment and tools that we use in our everyday lives are actually dangerous to us. They used to not be. We used to have a separation, but now we have to think about from law enforcement and public safety. Can we trust these devices? And let me give you guys another piece to let you know that we have to do better. There's a new opportunity that was published by the NTIA, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to build interoperable communications. As part of this interoperable communications, they came up with a project under FirstNet, which is the First Responder Network Authority, to unify the levels of communication following 9/11. The app development store, they said, oh, we're going to have an app store just like Apple and Android. You know, first responders can go in and log in. They did a survey and they did a security analysis against those applications. 18 of the 22 apps had significant cybersecurity vulnerabilities that allow an actor of not levels of sophistication of nation state, just intelligent people, to be able to exploit those vulnerabilities. So if we're going in with cybersecurity vulnerabilities the way that we have, we're doing it all wrong. So as we start knowing that you don't have to be at the nation state level, that we're building these flaws and we're not using proper, what the word is called cyber hygiene, that we're leaving ourselves open. And what do we expect to have happen? 2 slides ago, intrusion, breach, data breach. But the other part is that when it starts getting into life safety, if your parents have an insulin pump and they're walking down the street and someone says, here's a ransomware that comes up on your mobile phone and says, I know that this is your mother and she's 5 feet from me. I'm going to press a button if you don't deposit money into my account. That's where it's going to go. And if we start seeing things like that, we're going to pay a lot more attention to cybersecurity, but we shouldn't let it get to that point. But we do because we don't do better. So let's go on to the next slide. So the one thing that we have to think about, cybercrime is not anything that we didn't expect or knew was coming. This is a very busy slide, but it really speaks to same crime, different day. Burglary is hacking in its next generation term. Corporate espionage is ransom. The things that they're doing as far as the point where you had child predatory people who would lurk out in the parks, now they have a much more wide field of view by doing it online. And identity theft back and inside of physical security environments, that there's a perimeter or a guard or a camera. Those aren't the things that are the most exploitable because they're easier to monitor and easier to see. But when we start talking about the field components, laptops, mobile phones, access card readers, cameras, especially cameras, that sit on the edge in what we call it the unprotected perimeter, the environments, the abilities to exploit these, I think it's pretty much based on my conversation already. It's no surprise that we're giving over the keys to people due to weak authentication, poor design, and the process that these vendors say, what kind of testing have you gone through? Well, we hire companies that do pen testing. They did a pen test last week and they said that we are clear and fine. Well, you're only as good as your last pen test. And then after that, tomorrow, if you don't have a continuous data monitoring and those kinds of systems in place that are consistently evaluating what's going on, not only from the logical side, but from the physical access control and security side of the products, that you're bringing into your environment, then you saw it coming. And it should be no surprise to you that based on the information I had that you're going to suffer a data breach. How are you going to protect yourself? Well, am I going to separate my network from my cameras from the rest of my network? Used to be. But the need for us to be able to create enterprise solutions is no longer just a box sale. We need to have connectivity for law enforcement, public safety, and even in cybersecurity to monitor it. And is it cheaper to monitor one infrastructure or two? It's easier to monitor one, and cyber and physical for the needs that we have to share information amongst different stakeholders, such as Atlanta Police Department wanting to share information with the Federal Protective Service and the other three-letter agencies. The government has different kinds of requirements than the commercial organizations, but somewhere you've got to have a baseline of where can I establish a level of protection. And a lot of silos existed because I couldn't touch your network because of this, that, and the other. But the reason why they kept them apart was so that one company didn't introduce physical and cyber vulnerabilities to the other. But we all have to get along now because the dependencies and the technology is here for us to do greater things to protect our country and to protect our city and our state. And we just have to make sure that we're following those right kind of areas. But the risk is going to have to be moving to greater levels of protection for your edge devices that are unprotected. And the standards and the protocols and the processes that we take place, we have to be able to evolve in our cyber network defense strategies. So this is a super simple slide. It just lets us know that physical security and cybersecurity, they're so interrelated that you got perimeter access and intrusion, but there's a physical attribute to it, and then there's a cyber attribute. They'll make these slides available for us in, after the presentation, but it's the same thing. So that really shows that we have been able to merge effectively the kinds of communications into a convergent strategy. People don't like the word convergent, but really, hey, that's what it is. They have come together, and no one is more important than the other. IT thinks that they own the infrastructure, but they don't have the physical skills to being able to just dominate the levels of expertise and the training in being able to build standoffs, to being able to do facility assessments, to being able to provide the protective strategies, and to being able to share. And a lot of times, the reason why IT feels empowered is because they now are controlling the budget, because they don't want those unprotected, insecure devices to hit their network, and they don't want to be looking to the president of the company and say, we got breached because of this. So let's go on to the next slide. So we know about the Internet of Things. I really hate that word. It's really network connected devices. Isn't that what it is? Internet of Things, what's the things? Do we want to share information, but when you start taking a look, anytime, anywhere, any place, secure access to voice, video, and data, and from any location is the thing that scares me. I want to share this with you. It's so basic. Siri, Alexa, all this stuff, Google Assistant. When you say, hi Alexa, it answers because it's always listening to you. Always. You're at home, they know every time, and they have the acoustics that say they know how many times, and they can differentiate when your door opens, when your refrigerator door opens, when you flick a light switch. The sensors, those things are going, and God forbid you start talking about sensitive information between your husband and your wife, or your wife and your kids, and you're talking on the phone. Alexa hears it all. And now that we have these phones and these speakers embedded into our mobile devices, hey, we have no privacy anymore already. But why are we just feeding that machine? It's basically because we're prepared to transfer cybersecurity and privacy for convenience and easy use. Sure, we like this, and our children, they don't care about privacy. They will put your credit card out there in a heartbeat. They'll expose any information about you and everyone else through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and whatever. And what they don't know is they don't know the risk that they're providing. And the people who are paying for this service, you know, Google Mail and Gmail is free. But they're selling that for millions of dollars to the open market. So what they're doing is they're buying you to give up your privacy. And we're not paying attention. Let's go on to the next slide. So, is it going to get worse? Yes. Home automation and do-it-yourself, everybody wants to do it themselves nowadays. I might use a dental flosser, but you don't see me trying to do root canals on myself, you know? I go have professionals that do things that I don't trust myself to be able to do. I'm a cybersecurity guy with a lot of, you can't trust it. It's not safe, it's manufactured in China, it has a back door that's built in. That device that you connect is creating your own vulnerability to your own self by sharing that other information to someone in ways that you didn't intend it. Another example, some people have Wi-Fi. Do you need Wi-Fi when you're not at home? Why don't you turn that thing off? You don't need it. Do you want someone else to connect to your network while you're home? And what are they doing? They're brute force cracking that password. They're in there trying to ward drive and to find out how they can get in, who's using a default password. And once they get in, a lot of companies don't require virtual private networks to get into their corporate networks. They do the same thing I told you about before with the keyboard. They're exploiting people from their home personal base, and especially those people that are involved in law enforcement. Law enforcement sensitive information gets on these mobile devices all the time. It shouldn't. Texted passwords, text information of stuff that is definitely not cleared. You can ask Hillary about that. That you have to have a better level of security, but everybody wants the convenience. And now, networks, plug it into the network, you're done. That's all you need to do. Set it and forget it. So these devices that you can buy at Walmart and Sam's Club and Best Buys and all that, plug it in, load a piece of software. Don't worry about reading the terms and conditions that it can take any device and manipulate it any which way it can. You click OK. You're done. Let's go on to the next one. So, you know, my big thing is AI. We all hear about AI. Last year at ISC, I was challenged, and Joel knows because I've done some writing and some articles on separating fact from science fiction. How many products out there in the physical security industry are really running AI? Let me give an example. Is it less than 100? Anyone, if they think, raise your hand. Is it less than 10? Is it less than 5? Probably about maybe 2 or 3 that actually run AI, but how many people claim that they have it? Everybody. So there's a big difference between what artificial intelligence is. It's cognitive reasoning, decision support systems, executive information systems, even down to a dashboard. I've even had people who have a security dashboard that they call it an AI-based system. Heck to the no. But as far as what automation does for us is it frees us up with resources, and we need cyber, we need connected devices to help us to do more with less, but we got to do better. But the reason why I like this slide here is we're dumb as rocks as it's compared to computers. The things that they can do for us, if we took advantage of it and we had them connected, we had them secured, we can actually benefit significantly from the use of technology. But we got to do it safely, we need to do it securely, and we need to make sure that we have a level of understanding of what we're dealing with and how that impacts. And I think we're getting the message. I think everyone's kind of following along. Let's go on to the next one. So, let's talk about something that I think is pretty near and dear to our hearts, because the benefits of video surveillance applications are operational efficiency and effectiveness. We don't have to have people on the street because we have the abilities to see what's happening in other places and to record forensic evidence that can be used in legal prosecution and security for areas that will augment us and save us in manpower. But there was an event that we wanted to focus on, which was the DC inauguration hack. And I don't know if everyone really remembers a lot about it, but it was a few days before the inauguration of Donald Trump, and someone was able to go in and to hack in and load ransomware on a digital video network recorders, and then the screens went black. Well, there are a lot of questions that surrounding it lead to a very good case study for why we need to use and to have a better security posture. Because this, again, is the bridge of life safety and network connected devices. If the failure of a physical security device ends up in someone's life being taken or extreme risk, that draws special attention to, the requirement for why we have to do better. So we'll kind of go into it a little bit more. Okay? Where did the attack come from? Was it domestic? Nope. It was Romanians. 2 Romanians went in and they were able to infiltrate the network. So that lets you know that if the capabilities that we have are just not only domestic from what's called script kiddies, was a skill level of the Romanians who conducted the attack. Did they have a skill set that was of the area of the PK-35, Korean, German elite hackers? Nope. They're people running the script, just trying to get money. So if we have non-nation state actors that are able to penetrate very vulnerable systems that could be used to the point that they could impact the life safety of the President of the United States, what other things can they do? What other things and levels of exposure do we have? We won't pay a lot of attention to it until it really sits home. And that's the shameful part about it, because we know how to do it. We just need to do a better job at it. So, what was the impact? Well, the decision was made after the attack to go in and to wipe the servers and put the servers back up. Fairly easy to do in most environments that are network connected, but here's the process. Sometimes time would not be on your side. Because this was basically a fluke, it was not planned. If the Russians or the Germans or the North Koreans went in on the day of inauguration and performed the hack for a blackout, another organization, even a terrorist that could have been advised of something happening on the dark web, there are a lot of people that are waiting in wait. And because Secure Experts, we work with a lot of federal organizations, and we train at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, we do a lot of things, and we know the inside scoop. There are a lot of people who are waiting for a vulnerability to be published before 10 people can gang up. So we have the Super Bowl coming next year. We have the significant levels of defense. You have the news who will actually report, oh, the cameras went out at such and such a location. This gives a vulnerable opportunity for someone to implement life safety threats, increase explosives detection. They can, do a lot of things by turning off our sensors, our actuators, our network connected devices, distributed denial of service, all of those things, but very specific to the camera, is that we can deplete the operational capability of us to perform something that could be devastating to the city, devastating to the economy. And one of the things is that Atlanta, Georgia is target rich. The federal buildings that we have here house some of the largest amounts of people in the federal government. The classification of the facility is way up there. The risk is high. But could it have been prevented? Yes. And what it is it's patch management, being able to make sure that they had not let their system go in and not be maintained and supported by people who have experience not only in the physical security, but the cyber security as well. And I think that, the drumbeat that I have is, can we expect to see more of it in the future? You better believe it. The DIY and network connected devices is going to be over 2 billion devices in the next 3 years. And what's happening is that the manufacturers who we trust to provide this kind of technology and the capability to us, to provide us with video surveillance applications and video surveillance security, is at a very low level. So we're going to see more of it in the future. So we're going to go to the other area is, you know, cybersecurity crime. Has anyone really seen someone really get punished badly for cybercrime? It's a victimless crime. Financial impacts, FDIC will return financial fraud money. If your identity theft has been taken, they will put the money back in your account. But what is the end result of the penalties and the justifications for the crime? Is that from a behavioral approach, an armed criminal, they know that they take their life into their hands every time that they want to rob someone, and especially with concealed weapons and concealed carry and those other areas, they know that they're at risk by coming into your house and doing those things. But the evolution of cybercrime and the fact that all I need is to buy some software and ride around your house in a laptop and to try to breach you, and once I do, I can then call my technical support hackers to say, hey, I found one, what can we do? And they go, okay, well, just give us this information that you have, and we'll go in and we'll find it and we'll split the bounty with you. So it's a new evolution of the cybercrime and how things are going on, but we can definitely expect to see more of it in the future. So let's go on to the next one. So Secure Experts in partnership with Genentech and Bosch have come up with a technology which is called CHAVE, Credentialed High Assurance Video Encryption. And what we do is we leverage federal government credentials, which is called the HSPD-12, which enables you to do signing, encryption, and network authentication. We actually built one of those chips that goes into the edge device of the camera to protect the edge device. There is no username, there is no password. You actually have to insert your smart card into a reader, which goes out and it checks your what's called your credential state to see if you've been revoked or if you're put on what to call a no-fly list, a no-access list. But it establishes an audit trail with the federal PKI bridge, which is the government trust anchor for all communications and architectures, that it provides you with the abilities to meet what's called the chain of custody. Usually you have to send 2 law enforcement officers to go retrieve video from a scene to make sure it wasn't edited and manipulated from the time that it's brought back in. Because of CHAVE, because it has what's called FIPS 140-2 level 3, which is a high assurance level, that means that these cameras can be connected to the PKI Federal Bridge. And regardless of what agency, whether you were in the IRS or the Social Security Administration or DHS or in the military, you can connect one camera and open it up, because everyone who has access has to be in possession of this smart card credential. That way nation-state actors are prevented from being able to get in. Bosch is a German-owned company, but they actually have to ship their cameras to us at NASA, where we actually have to look at the camera and load specialized firmware with the encryption, and then we lock it down before it goes back out of our house. Unless you have a card at the other end, you won't be able to open it up. You can hand the camera to a Chinese or a Russian organization, and they would not be able to open up the video camera because they have not been face-to-face identity proofed, require background checks for the level of sensitivity that the cameras are being deployed in, and having an explicit reason to have access to the camera with an audit that's not even done by Secure Experts. It's done through the PKI Federal Bridge. And they can pull up every transactional record of who accessed the camera, from where, at what time. And if the security state of this camera ever goes down, they have an ability which is called a certificate revocation. It can not only suspend my driver's license, but it can stop my car from moving and make sure I can't drive. So when you can actually stop this transaction from occurring and shut that thing down, then that makes sure that not only for the cameras, but for anything that we're deploying that's network connected, it should have what's called a provable root of trust and a hardware security module that does not leverage the use of a username and password, but requires that identity to be proven, to make sure absolutely without question that this person not only is aware that they have an obligation to protect the information, but there are legal penalties for using or sharing your PIN number or your card to someone else. And we actually leveraged the capability that you can use a fingerprint and a PIN and a smart card for multi-factor authentication for high assurance environments. Let's go on to the next one. So we only have a couple minutes left, but I just wanted to kind of blurt these out. There are systems that we have deployed. Secure Experts works with the Department of Homeland Security under what's called a Cooperative Research and Development Agreement for automated information sharing. If I'm getting hacked by someone, now I can tell someone else, hey, someone used this new Jimmy to get into my car. Hey, so that my car won't get broken in, at least I can publish an advisory. But it's specifically mapped to what I have in my environment. It says if I have a Bosch camera and a Genetec video server that has this current firmware level, there's a risk and a vulnerability that's very specific to that. Our security guys just can't read all these advisories and see all of this stuff because we don't know whether it's applicable to us. So using this thing called STIX is a model that we've written into our applications that can identify the asset and the vulnerabilities to that asset, and we can push that information and actually go in and fix your infrastructure with patches, of course, that you approve. So this is the technology out for the future. Let's go on to the next one. The next one is the NIST cybersecurity framework. Everyone is trying to align with the NIST cybersecurity framework. What's the first step? Knowing what your assets are, knowing where they are. What is the configuration of those assets? So following the NIST structured assessment methodology and the cybersecurity framework, there's one which is a specialty. There's the regular one for commercial organizations, but there's the NIST cybersecurity framework for critical infrastructure protection. It's an enhanced set of controls that are available for those organizations. And the law enforcement community and public safety should begin modeling at the manufacturer level. All the sponsors up here need to be following these structures, whether they're domestic or foreign. They need to undergo the NIST cybersecurity framework and be able to prove that they have these things. And of course, we believe that they should have the trusted platform, crypto embedded modules in each one of their devices so they can have the same capability as a Chave solution. On to the next one. So these are kind of my takeaway words. The first thing is we need to get better at our asset inventory. When you configure a camera, it has over 200 settings. Field of view, default password, what's the IP, is it DHCP or network connected? All those things, we have to document what they are. We have to know what they are. You can't protect what you can't see. The next thing that we have is we have to control access to the data. We have to stop the vendors who are supporting our organizations from sharing a password for default username and password. Make them have their own personal identification card to make sure they're using unique passwords, that they're logging in and that they're accountable. Because if you use a default password that everyone knows, hey, I could have done it, John could have done it, Sally could have done it, but we want to be able to do that. And the other area is after we secure the devices, we have to have provability. Everyone can't just say, oh, we had an outside third-party pen testing. Get a government-validated, FIPS-certified product that's been validated, that you know works. And then afterward, we go back to the slide about the training. Having your people who are appropriately trained in being able to provide cybersecurity, industry best practices about not sharing passwords, and being able to move to more of multi-factor authentication is one of the areas that's very important. So training is also very important. So let's go on to our final slide. Our final slide, most organizations and people will sacrifice security for convenience. We know we can do better. We have to do better. It starts at the top, management, leadership of organizations, government officials, people who have responsibility for facilities and the protection of citizens. Hey, forget it, the fact that it takes people longer to get through the turnstile. Make sure you've got a better level to protect them and those around them. Establish connectivity, embed trusted modules. Don't use weak password systems in these products. There's technologies available to harden it. Build infrastructures that can create communities that can share information that are trusted, like U.S. passport offices. We accept passports from all over the world, but they all have the same structured format that you can identify fakes, spoofs, counterfeits, and all of that. And basically, hire qualified contractors, GC&E and all the other leading contractors, to do this because they know about physical security and cybersecurity. And those are the best ways that I know that we can lead forward to being able to look at the future and to being able to have any chance to keep alive and to survive against some of these cybersecurity threats. So that's all I have, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Darnell Washington. Please step back up on stage. We'd like to give you a little gift.